What's up, everyone? It's your boy, Auralnauts Gaming, and today we're coming at you with a throwback game review. That's right, after all this time, we're going back to the Matrix. Deus Machina Games recently announced plans to develop a fourth game in the series, so we thought it'd be the perfect time to go back and review the original games to help us contain our hype. Before we get into it, full disclosure, Deus Machina Games did approach me about a potential collaboration on this review, and I turned it down. I wanted you to know that I'm going to be fair and balanced when it comes to reviewing these games, and I thought that having a partnership with Deus Machina might not be the best look, so I rejected them. Everything's clean. That's not to say, however, that I'm not above a little bit of a branded partnership opportunity, and that's why today's episode is brought to you by Simulatte, America's favorite coffee. Stick around until later in the video and I'll tell you more about how you can fill your home with the signature aroma of Simulatte. But for now, let's jump into the review. The original Matrix games were the brainchild of first-time developer Thomas Anderson. This guy is a legend. Things like bullet time and reality-bending narratives may be cliches in gaming now, but it's easy to forget those things may have never existed in the first place without Anderson. Bullet time in particular was a game mechanic that revolutionized how we as gamers were able to experience power. If you've never played these games, fair warning, we're going to be headed into some spoiler territory, but let's be honest, this franchise is over 20 years old. If you still don't know the major plot twists from the most popular video game series ever made, I don't know what to tell you, other than move out from under that rock you've been living under all these years. I'm going to be breaking these games down into 3 different categories: story, gameplay, and audio-visual presentation. With that out of the way, let's jump into the review of the first Matrix game. It may not be a popular opinion, but the story in the first Matrix is not that deep. I know, we all remember the story being mind-blowing. Did it have an amazing twist? Yes. The big first act reveal was incredibly well done. We find out the real world, aka life as we know it, is a computer simulation designed to keep humans passive while their bodies produce energy for machines. The simulation being the titular Matrix, while the world outside is a burned out wasteland. Grubby survivors jack into the Matrix in order to fight the machines and free the people inside. A lot of our nostalgia for the game gets hung up right here because it was such an effective meta-commentary. We, as gamers, were engaging in a simulation of a character engaged with the simulation. The only acceptable response to this reveal was given by Neo himself. Whoa. It was such a powerful moment that we tend to forget how, well, forgettable the rest of the story was. We play as Neo, a human born in the Matrix, prophesized to end the war between man and machine. We only become Neo midway through the game, though. At the beginning, we go by the civilian name of Thomas Anderson. Now, I know what you're thinking. What? The guy who created the Matrix based the main character on himself? That's so lame! And you're right, it's super lame. And a little sad. Especially when you consider the real Thomas Anderson looks like this. But in the game, Thomas Anderson looks like this. In defense of Anderson, though, he was a nobody when the game first came out. He probably didn't imagine billions of people eventually taking control of a character he named after himself. Like, maybe he was a guy like you or me, struggling to find meaning in life and decided to use his talent to have a little fun with his escapist fantasies. And who knows, maybe there's a lot more of the real Anderson in the game version of Anderson than we realize. Either way, Anderson is a millionaire and we're all just playing his game, so let's leave our judgments at the door and move on. By day, Thomas Anderson works at a generic soul-sucking tech company, but by night, he is Neo, a super talented hacker. We know this because some shady-looking NPCs show up at his door and buy a disc from him, and they're grateful enough to make us think Neo must be really good at making whatever's on that disc. His hacking skills are what make him unique, I guess, because Neo is contacted by the associates of a wanted cyber terrorist named Morpheus. Neo eventually meets Morpheus and the truth of the Matrix is revealed, blowing everyone's minds and making us question reality itself. Morpheus frees Neo from the Matrix, teaches him how to manipulate reality inside the Matrix, then gets captured during a completely random side mission, making the entire goal of the game not to bring down the Matrix, but to just rescue Morpheus. This is a good place to dive into some gameplay talk because the story arc felt weird to me from a gameplay perspective. I understand how the story was less about destroying the Matrix and more about Neo learning to believe in himself, and rescuing Morpheus was a way to develop that. However, since it takes most of the game to get there, we aren't given access to all of Neo's moves until the game is basically over. If I buy a game about becoming a super-powered badass, I want to be in control of that badassery for as much of the game as possible. It takes an impressive amount of audacity to introduce flight, but only during the final cutscene of the game. You mean to tell me I could have been flying this whole time? I get that there needs to be a sense of progression in the gameplay. Sure, abilities should be earned over time. Otherwise, you might spoil the immersion. But that's not the way the game works. You go from having no powers to all of the powers almost instantly. You sit in a chair while one of the NPCs presses a button over and over again, filling you with one power-up after another until you know every martial art and how every gun ever made works. It's definitely a cool scene to watch, but again, this is a video game. I personally would have preferred earning all of these power-ups through gameplay. Instead, they're simply time-gated through Neo's belief in himself. The more he believes in himself, the more abilities you have access to. It's not really clear how the game measures this belief in himself. It seems to be tied mostly to the story, so it's not really a matter of player skill, but a matter of simply continuing to play, if that makes sense. Once you've progressed far enough in the story, you basically unlock God mode and there are no longer any real threats or challenges. The design philosophy definitely makes the game accessible, but maybe a little too accessible in my opinion. Anyone can beat this game. I mean, literally anyone. Even a stay-at-home soccer mom with no video game experience can beat it over a single weekend. Don't get me wrong, it has some of the most visually stunning set pieces in video game history. But the best ones are essentially extended tutorials with no real skill ceiling for a diverse player base. Like the dojo sequence, totally awesome, but it's still a tutorial and there's no risk of failure. Now that we've basically taken a dump all over your nostalgia, let's talk about the best part of the game, the graphics and sound. These graphics have really stood the test of time. They are so good that they could be mistaken for actual movie footage. And some of the visual tricks are still being used in game development today. The camera movement, the shifts in time, the audio cues to match, all of it worked so well to immerse the player in the way power is portrayed in the Matrix. Gaining a sense of speed by slowing everything down is a stroke of genius, and bullet time has gone on to become the basis of entire games like Superhot and even Red Dead Redemption. The music here is classic for a reason. I know exactly what to do and when to do it. The orchestral parts are so well done that we even associate them with parts of the game, like jacking into the Matrix. Seriously, when I picture moving in between the raindrop-like code of the Matrix, I know what that sounds like. When the game kicks into high action, the music switches to pulsing electronic beats to keep things a little bit more campy and fun, at just the right amounts. Playing this again, however, only makes me sad about how badly the follow-up games dealt with the balance of these elements. And I suppose on that note, we should talk about Matrix Reloaded. I don't think it's very brave at this point to say this game didn't live up to the expectations set by the original. The word reloaded got a lot of us excited by everything it implied, namely, more action. And boy, did we get it, but at what cost? Well, in this case, it cost us a coherent story. In the original game, a lot of the action felt like it was there in service of the story. Yes, there was some incredible bursts of combat, but story felt like the main focus. Maybe Anderson heard the criticism. Maybe he realized just how much of an impact the action had on the player base. In either case, he really doubled down on it, and now it feels like the story exists only in service of the action. The story can be summarized pretty easily if we want to be brutally honest about it. Bad guys are headed towards Zion, the last human city. To stop them, you need to find a secret room where you can shut them down. But in order to do that, you need to find a key to unlock the room. Are you a bad enough dude to find the key? That's it. That's the whole plot of the game. Reloaded takes a cue from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask by presenting a race against time. Only instead of a sentient moon on its way to crush the planet, it's sentient machines drilling their way down to Zion, which is just hilarious to me. In the original Matrix, all of the stakes are built around rescuing Morpheus, who possesses access codes that would give the machines access to Zion. But it turns out they could have just been drilling their way down there this whole time. If that was always an option, it sort of invalidates all the kung fu we did in the first game. Like, congrats on the new superpowers, Neo. But hey, we're gonna go ahead and take this fight to a place where you can't even use them, like we always could have done. Feel free to keep trying to use kung fu to try and stop us, though. The gameplay in Reloaded clearly tried to take what worked best from the first game and trim the fat a little bit. No more stealth mechanics, no more prize cranes. Reloaded mostly keeps the focus on kung fu, and that's what we do. We kung fu. We kung fu the crap out of everything. We kung fu more agents. We kung fu Smith again, who we killed in the last game, but now he's back and somehow there's hundreds of him. We kung fu the Oracle's bodyguard, which is doubly hilarious to me because all we had to do to meet her in the first game was knock on a door. We kung fu renegade programs who used to be like agents but now live a life of decadence and chocolate cake orgasms. Hands down, one of the weirdest cutscenes in game history, by the way. None of this is a bad thing, mind you. The fighting is my favorite part of the first game, and as far as I'm concerned, the more the better. What I am concerned about is Neo's other powers. By the end of the first game, we are introduced to a potential flying mechanic, and I was really looking forward to the possibilities in future installments. Maybe it came down to technical limitations, but the flying in this game basically ended up being loading screens. While it is visually exciting to see Neo above the clouds, we aren't given anything to do except proceed to the next area. The bullet time mechanic picks up where the first game ended by allowing us to stop bullets in midair, but that's not really new, and it's not really enough to make up for the lack of more robust flight mechanics. I really wanted to fly in this one. They did try something new with a dancing minigame, but wowzers, did this feel out of place. I suppose Anderson felt like he needed to develop Zion a little more, but it must have been a challenge since none of what makes Neo special in the Matrix applies to the real world. Any fighting done in the real world is going to lack all of the exaggerated physics of Matrix fighting, so I guess dancing was the next best solution? Things do get a little hot and heavy between Neo and Trinity though, and I kinda wish they put more focus on this than the weird rave. I get it though, it's a family-friendly game, we can't do that. Let's talk about graphics and sound. Reloaded keeps the bar high, this time mixing orchestral score and big beat electronica. I will say, however, that the stay tuned until next episode musical sting at the end of the game is pretty goofy. I get that Anderson and Deus Machina had already announced that the game would be releasing in a record 6 months from the previous one, making these two games like one full experience, but damn, that sting! While the action is over-the-top exciting and the graphics continue to wow with their realism, everything feels somewhat rushed and weightless compared to the first game. You really start to feel the hand of Warner Brothers in this one and its effect on Anderson's process. In the first game, every punch, kick, or throat stab felt like it mattered. You were always one mistake away from dying, and it really amped up the pressure. In Reloaded, all of the action looks and feels kind of like balloon animals fighting. None of our attacks ever feel particularly effective, and none of our enemies' attacks feel threatening. We just kung fu at each other until some unseen requirement has been fulfilled, and then we move on to the next fight. Neo has more power, but for some reason it feels like we have less agency. Even the moral dilemmas we're presented with by the end don't really matter. The game is going to end the same way regardless of which choice we make, and it's clearly just done to set up Matrix Revolutions. Speaking of revolutions, let me tell you about a revolution in home brewing. It's happening over at Simulate's website right now when you enter promo code NUTSFORKNOTS, and you will receive 99% off of your home brewing starter kit. You are going to be able to fill your homes with the unmistakable aroma of America's favorite coffee. And let me tell you something, guys, this thing is amazing. With a little bit of setup and some very easy to follow instructions, you're going to be a brew master. Guys, you know me. You know that I'm not going to talk about something that I don't use. And let me tell you, I use this. I use it so much, I don't drink anything else anymore. All I drink is coffee. I'm not lying. If I'm dehydrated, somebody offers me some water, I'm gonna be like, yeah, only if there's some coffee in it. And they're like, yeah, sure, it's got coffee in it. I'm like, I don't need it anyway, bro. I make my own drinks now. I got my own coffee flavored water at home, courtesy of my Simulate home brewing starter kit. It's all I use. It's the best. But don't take it from me. Jerry came over, I offered him a cup of coffee. He took a sip and goes, hey, bro, whoa, did you buy this? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, no, this coffee. You didn't make this, did you? You bought it. And I was like, what's it matter, bro? Who cares if it's homemade or store-bought? Do you like it? And he's like, yeah, I love it. It tastes just like Simulate. And I'm like, it's because it is, but I made it. I made it with my own Simulate home brewing starter kit, and you can too. With the promo code NUTSFORKNOTS, 99% off, you can be brewing your own Simulates. But only if you go to Simulate's website right now, enter promo code NUTSFORKNOTS. That's NUTZ, the number 4, NAUTS. That's it. That's my pitch. With that out of the way, let's get back to the other revolution. It'd be really easy to simply repeat all the criticism the game has already received. So instead of doing that, I want to focus on what may have gone wrong. As mentioned earlier, the emphasis on Kung Fu in Reloaded seemed to be a response to critics' consensus that the first game could have used more. Unfortunately, Reloaded was then criticized for featuring too much kung fu and not enough gunplay. Sure, enemies shot at you, but the inclusion of the new bullet plucking mechanic ensured every potential shootout just turned into a kung fu fight. One of the most memorable action set pieces from the original game, after all, involved Neo using quote-unquote lots of guns. So it's only natural people would have wanted more. To have Neo not use any guns whatsoever felt like a strange choice, especially in a game with Reloaded in the title. Why am I bringing this up now? Well, because once again, Anderson doubled down on criticism and cranked the shooting dial all the way up in Revolutions. By this point, the story is completely on autopilot. It's honestly sort of shocking how little has changed by the end of Reloaded. The machines, they're still drilling into Zion. Neo still needs to stop them. Humanity is still sort of counting on Neo to do it, but for the most part, they've just decided to handle it on their own. Namely, by shooting as many machines as possible, using such a comical number of bullets that the danger presented by empty shell casings becomes its own minigame. But we'll get to that later. Revolution starts off quietly, dumping Neo in a virtual train station. At the end of Reloaded, he used some kind of Matrix powers in the real world, and in doing so, forced his digital spirit into some kind of Matrix purgatory. He's not plugged in like the humans normally have to do in order to access virtual spaces, so I guess this is a power reserved for the one only? While Neo's friends try to figure out how to get him out, we engage with some kind-hearted NPCs. We're presented with some dialogue trees here, but I don't think your responses have any sort of impact on the outcome of the game. It comes off more as a way to give the illusion of gameplay in what is essentially an extended cutscene. This is about all we get to do with Neo for a while. Remember when I said the gun dial was maxed out in this game? Well, it's already been established Neo doesn't use any guns, so how does the game get around this? We take control of characters who don't have Neo's powers. While Neo is waiting to be rescued, his friends, Trinity, Morpheus, and Seraph are on a mission to get him back. You select one of the three and it's off to see the Merovingian. That's right, the Orgasm Patisserie from Reloaded. In order to reach him, you have to shoot a lot of people. These are Matrix people, so they can perform the usual gravity-defying Matrix actions, but it feels a little lazy here. Like even Anderson himself is tired of his own tricks. These leathery henchmen flip upside down to run on the ceiling, and it doesn't get much more complicated than that. The ceiling isn't even very high, so if you were already going for headshots, you don't have to adjust your aim very much. Their heads are almost at the exact same level. It's so goofy it almost feels like a parody of a Matrix fight. After some cutscenes featuring almost adults-only rated levels of BDSM, we get back to Neo. At this point, I should probably mention that Agent Smith from the first game is still somehow our primary antagonist. We're still trying to stop the machines from drilling into our home, sure, but the face of all of our problems is still Smith. Only now he wears all the faces. While the humans prepare to use every bullet available in the real world, Smith is taking over everyone's bodies in the Matrix. By the time we get back inside the Matrix, the entire population is probably going to want a kung fu fight with us. Neo says he knows what he has to do, but I'll admit, even though I'm controlling Neo, I still don't know what he's talking about. This happens a lot throughout the series. Neo says he knows what he has to do, and then somehow it magically works out. This either proves Neo is the one, or it kind of just proves Anderson is a better game designer than a writer. I feel like there's a lot of explanation needed in order to go from Neo not knowing what to do to Neo suddenly knowing what he has to do. We never get that explanation though. But we do get to fight a real-world Agent Smith outside the Matrix. Then we're off to the Machine City by way of yet another new game mechanic, ship-to-ship combat. The aerial combat is impressive to look at, but it's kind of no-brainer gameplay. Trinity pilots the ship in a straight line. Whenever a threat gets close to us, you hit the action button and Neo blasts everything with his new real-world powers. It feels so disorienting to be introduced to something like this so late in the series, and I can't help but feel the game would have been better off without it. At this point, I would have rather have used more guns and kung fu against the other machines. It wouldn't have made sense, but at least it would have felt familiar. Anyway, Trinity and Neo finally arrive at the Machine City, but before they do anything else, it's time to blow everything to pieces back in Zion. This is where Anderson must have truly lost his mind. This aspect of the game is so over the top and so radically divergent from the rest of the series, it almost feels like Anderson is punishing us for criticizing the previous games. What we get here is a straight-up tower defense game. It's no more complicated than the original Missile Command on the Atari, repackaged in slick modern graphics. Granted, everything here looks miles better than anything in Reloaded, but at what price? We take control of a gorilla-shaped mech with omnidirectional joints, allowing us to plant ourselves in one spot and shoot anywhere we desire. And boy, do we get our fill of shooting. And when we think we've had enough, Anderson scoops up more bullets and shoves the spoon into our mouths. The only break we get is a short minigame where we have to navigate bullet-strewn walkways in order to, you guessed it, load more bullets into our gorilla guns. I can almost hear Anderson yelling, "You like bullets? Here! There is no end to the number of bullets I can force you to eat." And it's like, damn, sorry for having an opinion on the last games, Thomas. Relax. The real scoop of sugar in Anderson's bowl of bullet cereal is that none of the shooting even feels like it matters. You pump round after round into formless clouds of enemies, but they never stop coming and they never slow down. You're simply forced to keep shooting at shapes of enemies until, mercifully, the game switches to the final showdown between Neo and Agent Smith. And here it is. Finally, a fight where we get to use all of Neo's powers. This is the Kung Fu fight to end all Kung Fu fights. The world has indeed become entirely made up of Smiths, but we conveniently only have to do battle with one of them. This gives the fight not only a sense of intimacy, but prevents it from becoming the chaotic visual mess we got the first time we had to fight a bunch of Smiths. We can actually appreciate the Kung Fu on display here. Plus, we finally get to fly. It feels so good, too. It almost feels worth it to have slogged through all the other parts of this game. Almost. I end up feeling more saddened by the realization we could have had more combat on this level in previous games, and not just at the very end of the final game. Eventually, we defeat Smith by sacrificing ourselves, and the game ends with a happy ending for both man and machines. By this point, it's become clear that as a game developer, Anderson has talent, but possibly lacks self-confidence. He took criticism harshly and overcorrected to a fault. It never felt like he was able to strike a balance between all of the things that made the Matrix games work so well, and maybe even crumbled a little bit under the pressure to come up with something new and exciting with each game. It's like he got lost on the journey to find the next bullet time. After Revolutions was released and got shredded by reviewers, Anderson took an extended hiatus from game development. Despite the fact Anderson hasn't released a new game since Revolutions, he's still considered by most to be the greatest game developer of our generation, so I'm confident in the new game and I think it's going to live up to the hype. Anderson has had a lot of time to think about the success of the original game and the fan feedback. My hope is Anderson used his hiatus to really hone in on the defining elements of the series in a way that will result in a game the Matrix fans have been waiting for. A game where we get to spend the whole time as a fully powered Neo with access to all of the potential we were teased with in the original series. Think of the possibilities. Hell, I'd be happy enough if we just get to use flight whenever we want. All this being said though, going back and playing these classic games has been a nice break from everything going on in the world. There's a lot of stressful things happening out there. Chief among them is a pandemic that's been giving people green eyes and making them pull an M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening. There's also whatever's going on in the atmosphere that's making the sky turn to rainbows every once in a while. I don't know, it's probably global warming. And on top of all of that, my friend Jerry said he watched a guy walk off the side of a building and just vanish. I was like, what are you talking about, dude? I checked the news. There's no dead bodies. He's like, I didn't say he died. I said he vanished. He's gone. And I'm like, Jerry, dude, calm down. Have another Simulate. Head over to Simulate's website and enter promo code NUTS for Knots and calm the hell out. All right, see you next time.